Hello, everyone. Welcome to Week 10 From the Stands College Football Game Day Show. My name is Brian, joined alongside Andy Hopper and Tom Scavetta. Andy, how's it going?
It is going, Brian. You know what week it is? It's Maction is back. We have had college football on Tuesday, Wednesday. We have a game on Thursday. It's like from now and Thanksgiving, or maybe even after that, there is a football game every day. Hard when there is this much action to watch.
It is a lovely time of the year, one of the best times of the year. College football all week long. Tom, how's it going?
It's going good, Brian. I know we have a lot to talk about today. Appreciate this as always. Let's chop right into this. Let's beef up some committee talk and talk some Week 9 games.
All right, we'll talk a little bit of Week 9 recap here. Tom, what caught your eye from this past week?
Well, it's Kenneth Walker the third's 5 touchdowns against Michigan. A game that I called 2 weeks prior. You guys remember? Two weeks
I do.
ago, not last week. 2 weeks ago. Uh, Peyton Thorne did not have his best game, throwing 2 picks, but the Spartans take down the Wolverines 37-33. Walker had 23 rushes for 197 yards. You know what that equates to? Over 8.5 yards a clip. And the Spartans defense, I'm going to give Cade McNamara a little credit. He threw for almost 400 yards, but man, did the Spartans defense stop the run. Haskins and Corum,
Mhm.
but neither of them went over 60 yards on the day. The Wolverines' defense was good at times too. Ojabo and Hutchinson had combined for 3 sacks, but the biggest difference of that game for me was the fourth quarter. The Spartans outscored the Wolverines 15-3. They came in clutch when it mattered most, and Michigan flopped as always. You know, Jim Harbaugh, we know who he is as a head coach, and he can't win the big games against big conference opponents, and he shows us why yet again. Iowa shows us that they're a trick. I know that we're a week late on that. Um, they're far gone. I mean, we all kind of saw that Wisconsin loss coming, and then the real surprising thing to me was not only did Auburn beat Ole Miss by 11, but Matt Corral did not throw a single touchdown pass in this game. He
Yep.
has talked himself out
Mhm.
of the Heisman discussion. This is bad. This is bad. Those are the three things that stuck out most to me in Week 9.
Yeah, I will give you credit there for that Michigan State call. Tom, you did hit me up after the show. You're upset because you wanted to bring it up. I had forgotten about it. But you're like, damn it. I called Michigan State 2 weeks ago. I wanted to bring it up on last week's show. But I will confirm that did happen. So that was a great call. I also picked Michigan State for the sole fact I thought Kenneth Walker was better than that duo for Michigan. And I think he showed it pretty well there. Like you said, 5 touchdowns for Walker. Not going to talk about it too much. Both teams actually looked pretty good. You brought up McNamara, who hasn't thrown that much throughout the season, but Andy pointed out that he really didn't have to. But he did look pretty good. So Michigan going forward, they still have that game with Ohio State. They have a chance there, I think. So maybe talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, one of the biggest things to me about that game, I thought Michigan State did look like the most well-rounded team, despite McNamara getting cooking a little bit from the pocket. I got called out a lot on Twitter, on Facebook for saying that. People were like, "Oh, they're not well-rounded." Kenneth Walker did everything. Well, Kenneth Walker only had 23 touches. He's the best player on that team. He scored once every 4.5 times he touched the ball. Why would you give the ball to anybody else if you can get a
Mhm.
touchdown, produce a touchdown from that guy once every 4 or 5 times he touches the ball? Give it to him 30 times. Give it to him 35 times, actually. One that you didn't mention, Tom, Iowa getting taken down by Wisconsin 27-7. They're just falling apart. Spencer Petras, my guy, you are. Could we call him a joke at this point? Maybe a little bit mean, but I mean, God, Iowa, please just.
Hey, I mean,
Hey, I did give him 3
week
seconds.
two show, week 1 show, I said I said Petrus is dog shit. He fucking sucks. They had 3 turnovers and 5 yards in the first half.
Yeah, it was it was very bad. And then Georgia, I thought Georgia Florida might be, because it's world's largest outdoor cocktail party, back at it again. I thought the fans would get rowdy and Florida would maybe rally behind them. They didn't. They got blown out by Georgia, who is, we can confirm again this week, far and away the best team in college football right now. So those are the ones that caught my eye the most. Andy, what's on your docket here?
So yeah, I won't. Michigan State. I did pick Michigan. I will say, in like 3/4 in, you thought they had it. They looked really good. They must be watching a lot of Notre Dame tape, Tom, with all this 2 quarterback garbage. Like, I don't know why you take McNamara out of the game. You bring in, was it JJ, is it McCarthy or something like that? And he comes in, fumbles the ball. They're able to get the first one. Second one, they turn the ball over. Michigan State scores on that next possession. They bring McNamara back in the 4th quarter, throws that back-breaking interception that is the game. Good on Michigan State. The Big Ten is very interesting, guys. We have State sitting at 1 loss. Michigan still would make the playoff. Michigan State still undefeated. They still have to play Ohio State. Penn State still not really in the mix, but, I mean, they're a pretty decent team. Wisconsin's looking pretty good right now. They're not really a threat to make the playoff, but they could knock somebody off if they make it to the Big other games that you guys didn't mention, shout out to Miami. They get a win. They go on the road to a ranked Pittsburgh team, take out Kenny Pickett, and the Panthers, effectively ending any hope of Pittsburgh kind of making any real noise. Who else? West Virginia, or not Ohio State, Iowa State. Iowa State's pretty much dead. Why anybody thought Florida was going to hang with Georgia was just beyond me. I hammered Georgia. Stop betting against Georgia. They're going to beat you. Nobody is going to beat them. What else? Purdue over Nebraska. Purdue's quietly having a pretty decent year. Michigan State, sleepy game at Purdue this Saturday. What else? There was a Mississippi State over Kentucky. I was on Kentucky. I didn't think that line made sense. They made 31-17 there. And then BYU and Virginia was probably the most fun game nobody watched. Final score 66-49. In the second quarter, Virginia scored 35, and they end up losing the game. 66-49 to BYU. I'm trying to pull up the box score here. Of course, it doesn't want to load for me. Hold on. So in the BYU scored 21 in the first quarter, 17 in the second quarter. Virginia scored 7, and then I mentioned 35 in the second. Virginia's held to 7 points in the second half. BYU scores 28 more. They win the game 66. I was on Virginia big there, so that sucked. But my little rant here, and then I'll be done. Illinois drops 1 at home to Rutgers. I unfortunately was at the game, so I'm new when going to games this season. Illinois games. They're up 14-10 at half. Obviously, they're riding high off that huge 9 Penn State last week. In 19 overtimes, a game where they run for 357 total yards on the road. At home against hasn't won a conference game yet this year. You're held to 107 yards and 14 points, and you score nothing in the second half. Absolute goose egg, absolute joke play calling by the offensive coordinator. I'm 100% okay with Brett Bielema still being here. I know I'm not expecting this to be a completely finished product and them to be good. At least 3 conference home games that they have mismanaged and dropped and lost. Then could be in a completely different position due to conservative play calling, due to Tony Peterson that out of his ass. So we need a new offensive coordinator. Other than I'm okay. And it's not like Rutgers is a bad team. They're 4-4. Schiano's got them moving in the right direction, but you can't follow up with 357 rush yards for 107 rush yards at home to Rutgers. As much as they're not terrible, but they had no conference games. They're coming off a 21-7 loss to Northwestern, who Northwestern either. So I don't know, just too many bad losses. That's all I got for this week, boys.
All right. Solid recap there. We'll jump right into, you kind of mentioned it, first committee rankings. Questionable, to say the least, I think. There's been a lot of conversation on the initial rankings here. Just to shout them out, the quick top 6, we had Georgia at number 1, Alabama at number 2, Michigan State number 3, Oregon number 4, and then your first 2 out are Ohio State and Cincinnati. Listen, the first post interview, I guess we'll call it, that they usually have that one person from the committee come out and talk to ESPN about how they came to this decision. That was an absolute train wreck. I believe it was Barta this time went on, and he couldn't explain away anything he did. To me, this just seemed like an absolute clown show. Tom, we'll start with you on this one. What are your initial thoughts here as, the Notre Dame fan? You guys have that one loss. They've ranked you number 10. But the team that you're kind of relying on to help, boost you a little bit, Cincinnati, who is undefeated and your only loss, got a little bit of disrespect here and it is down at number 6, despite having that top 10 win, despite looking, very, very good. What are your thoughts on this so far?
What are my thoughts, Brian? Well, as far as Notre Dame is concerned, I'll say this. I'm used to this, so this is no shocker to me that they've done this. The only argument I'm going to make for Notre Dame is I think they should be ranked above Wake Forest because Wake Forest hasn't played anybody, and our one loss was to Cincinnati. I think Notre Dame should be 9. I think that's a fair judgment considering 6, 9, 11, and 12 all lost last week. That's my argument for Notre Dame. They should be at 9, not 10. How the hell is Oklahoma at 8 and undefeated? I get it. Maybe they shouldn't be in the top 4 because of all the close games that they've played. How do you rank them any lower than 6? The team hasn't lost. Bama lost to a 2-loss team, and Oregon, a Pac-12 team who lost to an unranked. Yeah, they beat Ohio State, but what the hell are you thinking? What the hell? How is Cincinnati not in the top 4? This is a huge loss for the G5. I mean, this is ridiculous. Bama is 2 with 1 loss. Bama's going to get in with 2 freaking losses. That's a damn shame. Bama should be 4 at worst with 2 losses. That you can justify. If they play Georgia really tight, maybe it's a field goal final, maybe it's an overtime game, but man, I have nothing wrong with Michigan State being in there, but Ohio State over Cincinnati, Oregon over Cincinnati. I mean, we make fun of the Pac-12 every week. We have a Pac-12 second segment every other week. How the hell is a Pac-12 team in there? Who have they played? Yeah, they beat Ohio State, but Ohio State's been pedestrian at times this year. Come on, guys.
Yeah,
get your crap together.
It's been
bad.
It's been ridiculous. Year after year, we see some bad ones, but this is just an absolute stinker. Andy, what are your thoughts on? I guess so. There's a big argument to people saying Cincinnati, the AAC is not that good. But just for reference here, overall opponent records for these top 10 teams, Cincinnati, well, this is going overall records of their opponents so far. Cincinnati has played a totality of teams under 500, but so has Oklahoma, Michigan State, Oregon, and Wake Forest is right on 500. So this is not an argument. They made this argument about Cincinnati, but this applies to about half of the top 10, and they just seem to ignore that. So what were your initial thoughts on what we saw with these rankings?
It's hypocrisy. It's 5 invitational. Stop lying. Stop pretending that Cincinnati even has any chance. And it's a fucking joke. Fire the College Football Playoff Committee into the sun. Alabama at 2 is really where I start to get pissed. What have they done to prove they're the second best team in the country? And what is going to happen? Alabama's going to win out. So is Georgia until the SEC championship game. So they're both going to come in with one loss. Georgia's going to beat them by one score. It'll be some super close game. And we're going to get a fucking 2-loss Alabama team in the college football playoff. No 2-loss team has ever made the playoff, and they're going to fucking put one in over an undefeated Cincinnati. It is ridiculous. Obviously, there's still time to go. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but and you're telling me Mississippi State's the 17th best team in the country?
That one to me hurts.
Texas A&M, Kentucky, NC State, or Mississippi State's. Those are quality wins. I won't lie, but you're lying to yourself if you believe that they're the 17th best team in the country and the committee's not bumping them up to make Alabama's resume better. Oregon, they're going to put at 4 now to make Ohio State's win, or to make Ohio State look better if they win out. They're proving that these losses don't matter. That is what they're proving to me. It's the losses don't matter. At some point, get rid of these all the math and shit. We have to give the Cincinnati team a chance. If they go undefeated, they deserve a chance, because why the hell not? Half of the fucking semi games are blowouts anyways. What Cincinnati played a 1-score game with Georgia last year in the Peach Bowl. And then, of course, they're in the SEC. They weren't trying if it's not the playoff. 40% of their starters are sitting. Get the fuck out of my face with that shit. Cincinnati proved that they belong at the table, and this college football playoff committee has proved once again that they don't give a single fuck if you are not a marquee name. Until this playoff gets expanded, until it's more than 4 teams and less than half of the teams that are eligible for this playoff or even really have a chance to make it, college football, it will continue to be a joke. I am imploring the group of 5 commissioners to meet today and plan a separation from the college football playoff. Plan your own shit. Name your own national champion, because at this rate, they don't respect you. They don't care. They think you're a joke. And these rankings are an absolute joke to me. There are some that I do agree with. Obviously, Georgia there. I don't mind Michigan State. Oregon's not the 4th best team in the country. Ohio State at 5. Yes. Okay. I'm okay with Wake Forest at 9. They're undefeated, but they're going to be Wake Forest is the first Power 5 team that actually has a legit chance to go undefeated, that has no shot of making the college football playoff because of how down the ACC is this year. But it's I just fire them into the sun. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just if you're gonna do this, just stop fucking lying about it and tell whatever schools have the most money.
Yeah,
that's my thoughts. It's
just so for me, as the G5 person, I'll quote. This is the AAC commissioner, Mike Oresco. Obviously, they asked him right after the rankings came out, because of where Cincinnati was, what his thoughts were, and he made a very good point. He said, "It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The committee doesn't rank our teams that deserve to be ranked, and then they turn around and look at us and say, 'You don't play any ranked teams.'"
Exactly.
I mean, that
they left SMU and Houston off, which is ridiculous.
Yep, he hit the nail right on the head there. This kind of coincides with the Mississippi State thing. Listen, if you want to rank Mississippi State right now with their 3 losses at 24 or 25, that's entirely understandable. But what they've done is set themselves up for that to be a quality win for Alabama, because now that Mississippi State team can probably lose another game if it's against a ranked SEC team like, say, Kentucky. I don't have their schedule right up in front of me, but they can lose another one, have 4 losses, and still now fall into that 24-25 spot and be a ranked win for Alabama. They did this
exactly why they put them there.
Yeah, they did this for someone. So Minnesota, Minnesota has not looked good. Also, I believe with the 3 losses, they're a little bit lower at 20, but that's a boost for Ohio State right there. I've watched Minnesota. They are not that good. Honestly, I think Wisconsin is better than Minnesota, and for some reason they've ranked Wisconsin below them. I mean, if they're just gonna boost these teams up, they could have at least switched those two, and it would have looked a little bit better. But yeah, for reference, there's the people, the BCS know-how on Twitter. They always do the simulated BCS in comparison. Obviously, they also had Georgia at number 1, Cincinnati number 2, Oklahoma 3, Alabama 4, Michigan State 5. Obviously, that has the computer polls mixed in with the AP and coaches. That's probably a little bit different than I would have. But Tom, I agree. The disrespect for Oklahoma, we shit on Oklahoma for like the first 4 weeks, but the majority of that was focused around Spencer Rattler, I feel like. Now that they have Caleb Williams in there, they have looked phenomenal for like 5 straight weeks. I mean, they had a tight game with Texas, but
They didn't look phenomenal against Kansas. That took the second half of Kansas being Kansas. They did not look phenomenal. There have been multiple times this year that Oklahoma has squeaked by teams that had no business hanging with them.
I agree.
That is the only one. But they shouldn't be 8. They should not be 8. They're undefeated. They're in the Big 12. That's low. But I'm not sold that Oklahoma is just this unbeatable team. There have been times where they have not looked the best.
I don't think that they're unbeatable for sure, but to put them at 8 is almost as laughable to me as having Cincinnati at 6. It's obviously 2 very different stories, so it's kind of hard to compare the two. For reference, the simulated BCS has Oregon down at 9. 8 is probably where I would put them, so it's a little bit closer. What's going on, Tom?
It don't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And apparently they don't value the Notre Dame win that much for Cincinnati. I mean, it's a shame. We were in the college football playoff last year, and I'm saying put them in. Put them in.
It's all right. So I pulled a Reddit post from CFB a couple weeks ago for that the D2 game we had, and we have another nice write-up from a user here, JT Prager. He thought the rankings were extremely wild, and he did a little bit of research here. So just some things to point out here. I will point out the first one here, UTSA, because they were going to be on our shots and chasers later. Took them off because guess what? The committee decided not to rank them, despite the fact that they were up at 16, 17 in the AP poll. UTSA is just the second ever undefeated team to be unranked at any point in the CFP ranking, initial or otherwise. Think about that.
It's a joke. It's a fucking joke. Like they're not even trying to hide it. You put Oregon at 4 to make their obviously they're really they're valuing that win over Ohio State. So they're trying to make Ohio State look better so they can say at the end of the year, well, look at Oregon. They're a really good team. They're bumping up the teams for Alabama. They're not ranking SMU and Houston to strengthen their case against Cincinnati. It's just like, if you're going to do this, at least try to be fucking sneaky about it. Gary Butter's a fucking idiot.
And then, speaking on Alabama, because that seems to be the one most people are upset about, Alabama is the only non-undefeated team to ever be ranked in the top 2 in the initial rankings. I mean, like you said, they could not make this any more obvious. They're, like you said, Andy, I love it. Losses just don't matter to them anymore. In their heads, they're playing the rivals or 24/7 sports version of who has the most 5 stars. Mm-hmm. Who do we think would be the best if we were to play NCAA 2023 or whenever the next release game is coming out? Who's got the 99 star rating? Because they don't care about losses anymore. Listen, Alabama is probably the second most talented team. Oklahoma is probably a top 5 talented team, but that doesn't mean that they can slip up, or that they can't. Sorry, that they can't slip up, and these
Mm-hmm.
teams have. All right, Texas A&M is a decent team, but guess what? Alabama lost to them. All right,
Mm-hmm.
they've got that loss. Oklahoma doesn't have a loss.
They have to
Michigan
be punished for
State
that. That's a
has a top.
two-loss team.
Yeah, Michigan State has a top 10 win against a team who clearly the committee values because they didn't move Michigan down very far, and
Mm-mm.
they've ranked Michigan State below them. I mean, the only thing I can dog Michigan State for is that Peyton Thorne is not the best QB. But
Michigan was the first team they beat with a record over 500.
Hell, our loss is better than Alabama's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to
I
Cincinnati.
agree.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just I don't disagree that Alabama's not a good football team. They are good. They probably are one of the best teams in the country, but there has to be consequences. You have to be punished for losing to a two-loss team. Obviously, we have the rest of the season to see how it goes, but if no other team has made it into the playoff with two losses, why do we start now if you have teams behind them that are undefeated? It just like racks my fucking brain, boys. Just
It is mind blowing. Yeah, the committee likes to talk about, I test this, I test that.
Mhm.
I've done a smell test on this committee, and they smell like a load of bullshit. So,
and they stink.
they are. It's a group of stinkers. Listen, we could probably go on about this for another 20 minutes. But we'll wrap it up because
the whole show, yeah.
It'll just get louder, and we'll all get madder. I'm sure Tom will get madder about Notre Dame's ranking, so we'll leave it there. I think everyone probably has very similar opinions around the country about this initial ranking. And we'll move into our next segment. We're going to do a buy or sell here. Get the stonks ready. We got our first one here. Coaches. Firing coaches mid-season. Is this a buy or sell? Is this good or bad for teams to be doing this sort of thing here? Obviously, this is on the back of a few mid-season firings already. Obviously, we had Matt Wells at Texas Tech, and now TCU has let go of Gary Patterson, who's been there for a few decades. Andy, we'll start with you on this one. Buy or sell, teams firing coaches mid-season?
Well, in these two cases, I don't know if it was the right move, boys. You fire a guy in Matt Wells that had his team at 5-3 on the year, but apparently to Kirby Hocutt, this move was inevitable. And then you look at a guy like Gary Patterson. Sure, I mean, TCU may not be the best team this year, but he's undoubtedly the best coach in TCU history, a guy that's been with them. I mean, he took over as the intern when they were in the WAC. His first year, they moved to the Conference USA, and then from there to the Big 12, two conferences. I mean, BCS bowl games for TCU, 181 and 79. I think in certain cases, like sometimes it has to happen, but Lincoln Riley might have a point here. I mean, it's tough for you're walking in the building every day, and this guy has your head coach and the coaching staff has the same message, the same thing they're trying to do. And in the middle of the year, that's just uprooted. And, like the intern will try to do their best to keep it normal, but it's not the same. I'm going to buy this, guys.
You mean sell here?
Whatever.
If you don't like it, you're selling. Tom, buy or sell firing coaches in the midseason?
Oh, okay. I mean, I was buying what Lincoln Riley said. I like
Gotcha.
his argument, so I'm selling. Yes.
Gotcha.
Excuse me.
Simple sell. Matt Wells, you mentioned Gary Patterson, TCU, 20 plus years, gets fired midseason. That's not the way you want to end a 20-year tenure. I don't agree with it at all. There's some instances where it's unavoidable, but it's not a good look on college football if this becomes a trend. So that's briefly my opinion on that. I'm selling this.
Yeah, I'm going sell as well. I guess you could preface this if there's like some terrible off the field
Yes.
incident that happens that like is a blemish on the university. I can see that, but if we're talking purely football here, I don't see what advantages this has. I think it spooks current players unless there's dressing room problems, which again is off the field incidents to me. So I guess I wouldn't really count that in terms of being, football related. But I feel like you're spooking the dressing room. You're spooking the rest of the coaching staff. You're throwing an interim in there who's, I'm sure they might do better than you would expect the head coach if they pull off some random ass wins. But I don't think that would be entirely on the change. And most of all, I think you're spooking recruits. Keep everything in house. I don't understand. There's what 4 5 games for some left for these teams. I don't like. What about the? It's not like they're 0-8. This dude's been with them for 22 years. 260 games coached. Every single time they've scored points. I'm pretty sure that record is only behind. They were talking about Florida's a couple of weeks ago, being shut out, or maybe it was just this weekend against Georgia. I think that Georgia has the longest, or sorry, Florida has the longest streak of scoring in a game, not being shut out. Well, Gary Patterson is on a 260 game streak, so it's not like this guy is absolutely god awful. Let the guy finish out the season. I didn't watch enough Texas Tech to make a call on the Matt Wells thing. But yeah, I agree with Lincoln Riley. You probably should not be doing this unless there's an off the field incident. So I am also selling. And then moving on to the next one, buy or sell. Ohio State will lose to a Michigan team. We saw these two Michigan teams take each other on at Michigan State this past weekend. Both looking pretty good. Despite the loss, Michigan looked a lot better than I think many expected. Cade McNamara. Like Andy said, he hadn't, needed to show us enough, but he showed out pretty well this weekend. Tom, we'll start with you on this one. Buy or sell, Ohio State will lose to a Michigan team.
If you're Ohio State, you love the fact that you have Michigan State at home and Michigan on the road, right? I think that's the way you want to go through this. But it's a brutal way to finish off the season. Number 3, MSU, number 7, Michigan. This could pretty much haunt them for making the college football playoff. They've looked shaky at times versus Penn State last week. They proved they were vulnerable against Oregon. I'm buying this. I think they will lose to a team from Michigan.
Hmm.
Obviously, you guys should know which one I'm referring to, just based off of knowing me. But I think they're going to lose one more game. And yeah, I'm buying this for sure.
Yeah, I'm on the buy train as well. Solely playing the odds here. Both of those teams that was a really good game this past weekend. Michigan fans are going to argue that, the refs blew the game for them. It's obviously one of those situations where they're focused on one call late in the game because, that's the last memory. They're like a goldfish. But the reality is Michigan State still played a really good game. They had a fantastic end of the game. That second half was much better than the first. Obviously, Kenneth Walker looked very, very good. But again, on Michigan side, Cade McNamara, the kid can sling the ball. So both of these teams now, to me, I view as a threat for Ohio State. Ohio State, I think, has recovered a bit from early season when we kind of shit talked them a little bit alongside Oklahoma. But C.J. Stroud he's found his groove. Travion Henderson is just phenomenal, and obviously that receiving core they have is very dangerous. But I thought they were going to kill Penn State this past weekend. I genuinely thought they were going to kill Penn State. I thought Penn State would be downtrodden after that loss to Illinois. I thought Ohio State was going to walk into that game and win by 30. And Penn State gave them trouble, but didn't look great. I mean, they looked good doing it, but Ohio State looked a little bit shaky. So just playing the odds here, I think one of these teams will beat them. I'm not as confident as Tom that it's going to be Michigan State. If I had to pick, I guess I would pick them, but of the two, I just think one will beat them playing the odds. Andy?
Sell. I've seen this movie before. They're going to win out. They're going to win out. As much as I would love to see Harbaugh finally get a win over Ohio State. I mean, what do both of these teams like to do? They like to run the ball. Ohio State defensively only gives up 108 rush yards per game. They're pretty good against the run. CJ Stroud has 2,200 yards, 23 touchdowns, to only 2 interceptions on the year, or maybe 3. Yeah, 23 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I think Ohio State's a superior team in the Big Ten, and I've just seen this movie before, guys. So until I am proven otherwise, I am selling it.
All right. And
also, I got to go against the grain. We know that.
And then for the third one here, we have buy or sell recruiting overseas. Andy's Illini have just offered a Danish man. He's only 18, but if you see him, the dude is definitely a man. 6'9", 300 pounds, lean and mean, quick off the ball. We messaged him, tried to get his highlights for this clip, did not answer. Magnus, what are you doing? Magnus Muller, out of Denmark. And we have seen, I think punters is probably the most popular one out of Australia. So there is some value in international recruiting, but it is expensive. Andy, we'll start with you. Buy or sell, teams should be recruiting more overseas.
Buy. Why the hell not? If you can play, who cares where the hell you're from? Like, who cares? Like, pretty much every college program these days has a punter from Pro Kick Australia, including Illinois, Blake Hayes. I mean, Brett Bielema was trying to build this offensive line, and would you not want a guy that's 6'9", 300 pounds, lists himself on his Twitter as an offensive lineman / tight end? Move him, let him start running some routes, or you just use him as maybe the best blocking tight end of all time. Yeah, I'm all for it. Why not?
Tom, buy or sell?
I'm selling this. It depends on your team's recruiting areas and strategy. It doesn't work for teams like Notre Dame, Alabama. I'm pretty sure the furthest recruit they have is Mechie from Canada. So
right.
I think
Illinois is frequently named in the same breath as Notre Dame and Alabama.
if you're a lower team like Illinois, no offense, Andy, maybe you try to think outside the box and use this type of strategy. But for me personally, I'm selling this idea. I don't think it's smart. A lot of these good teams already have good recruiting strategies. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't. I'm not on the train saying don't recruit international players. I just don't think we should be recruiting more overseas.
Okay.
Not a lot are. Like, it's a very like flash in the pan, like over, like you got to be like really fucking good to actually get.
Yeah,
I don't know, dude. Do you like if you?
playing level is different.
It is. I watched the tape. Obviously, it's not going to be the same level, but he's 6'9", 300 pounds. Like, just give this dude a shot and see what he can do.
Yeah, not much to lose. Yeah, for me, I'm buying overall. I understand not every school can do this. Money wise, I was looking into what teams have. Michigan, obviously, they have a ton of money. They did I think some of their spring ball 2 seasons ago I want to say they went to France. It was somewhere there, and they did recruiting throughout Europe.
Oh yeah, I think I remember that.
Yeah, but this kid Moeller is taking his tape from his games, and he's just tagging O-line coaches. Like these people don't have to visit him. Didn't have to visit him. He only tagged. I can't remember your offensive line's coach, Andy, if you know it.
It's Bart Miller, I think.
Okay, yeah. So he just tagged him in a tweet like a week ago, and now this dude's got an offer from Illinois. I don't know if that's his other offer is from, I think, Central or Western Michigan. I'm not sure if he sent them a tweet or not, but I mean, with social media these days, there's pockets of talent out there because of the different sports these teams play that I think there's some hidden gems, and it is totally worth it to keep your eye on the overseas. Obviously, the Australian punter thing is probably the biggest right now. This year, there are currently 53 Australian punters in college football.
Everywhere.
There's what, 130 teams? So over a third of punters we've just been picking off out of Australia. It's kind of ridiculous.
They can kick the shit. They can punt the shit out of the ball too. They're like all like awesome. Like Blake Hayes is great. What about that dude, Miami's punter? He's Australian, but he's like 28 or 29, and he's like just fucking tatted like all the way up. He's an absolute tank. for the brand.
Yeah, they can't. It's interesting. I play locally with a club on and off. The sport that they pull these kids from, Australian rules football, it's a brutal sport. If you like the brutality of football and don't like how things are getting soft, go watch yourself some Australian football. They fight mid game. Like refs will just walk by them as they fight, and then the guys are friends and they'll play on like 5 seconds later. It's the sport is ridiculous. Um, but yeah, I don't know how these kids get this leg. But so Nathan Chapman, who is an Australian who tried to come here, I believe late '90s, from Australia and kick, didn't work out with the Packers because they didn't like that style because they kick different. It's
Mhm.
not exactly the two steps punt, classic NFL. So he started Pro Kick Australia, which is the program that a lot of these kids are coming from. In the last 7 years, they produced 5 of the Ray Guy award winners, which is like the Heisman for punters.
Mhm.
uh, but I mean, it's probably a bit disrespectful to put the Ray Guy and Heisman in the same sentence, but you know what I mean.
No, it's not. You just obviously don't. You just don't love football, then, Brian.
It could be. Um, but yeah, and then the other big one to me is how they pulled the Samoans out of for Hawaii, Utah, the California schools. USC usually gets a
Oregon,
bunch. They
Oregon gets some too.
Yeah, they just get these big ass rugby dudes,
Hmm.
and they're usually pretty damn good. So yeah, I think there's definitely value out there for some of these guys. The biggest dude right now that I could find is Daniel Falele at Minnesota. He's 6'9", 380. I want to say we talked about him towards the beginning of the season when Minnesota was on the shots and chasers. But yeah, I think there are pockets, and if these guys can, you know, make the contact themselves to these coaches as opposed to needing you know to send fucking Jim Harbaugh over to France to get them. I think there's great value. So I'm buying this as well. Moving in now to our shots and chasers. First up, we have UNC, who has fallen a little bit from grace this season. We had big hopes for them, but they've already racked up a few losses. Going up against ACC leader Wake Forest, undefeated, but disrespected by the committee in this initial rankings. Tom, we'll start with you. Who do you have in this game?
I don't know about disrespected. I think they should be lower than Notre
Ooh,
Dame. I think they should be 10. I think that's the correct spot for them. Remember that Army game? They gave up 56 points to Army. I mean, I can't really justify putting them any higher than this.
Tom hates the troops.
Sam Hartman has talked himself into the Heisman discussion. 22 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Christian Beal Smith is a pretty good running back, and I love their receivers as well. A.T. Perry and Jakari Roberson combined for 14 touchdowns through the air. That's going to be a headache for the Tar Heels defensively. Look out for Travion Reed, 3 picks in the secondary. And this uh, Wake Forest defense has 24 sacks in 8 games. They're averaging 3 sacks per game. Now, UNC, they come into this game, a loss to Notre Dame. Sam Howell looked a little bit better. Howell is a dual threat. He's not just a pocket passer. He can run. He has almost 600 rushing yards on the year, 6 TDs on the ground. And I like Ty Chandler a lot. I think he's filled in that void a little bit that's been missing, that was left by Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. And now we look at the wide receivers. And the receiving is a big problem on this team. And, you know, I'm not trying to cut Sam Howell any slack here, but it's part of the reason why his play has declined this year. Josh Downs is the only guy who's been there for him.
Hmm.
Insane stat line, 70 catches, almost 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns. There's no other receiver on that team that has over 17 receptions. 70 to 17. Your first receiver to your second ranked receiver. That's a problem. Wake Forest is going to take him away from this game. Uh, I don't see UNC being able to pull this out despite being favored by 2.5 at home. It's clearly the home line. I have Wake Forest winning this game and improving to 9-0 on the season. I also just don't like UNC as a school, but that's for another day.
all right, Andy, Wake Forest or UNC?
UNC is hot garbage. So I'm going to take the Demon Deacons. But this is interesting, guys. This is a non-conference matchup. Both of these teams play in the ACC, but it will not count in the ACC standings for the second straight year. They're, I guess playing this as a non-conference matchup because each of these teams had a slot and they're trying to satisfy the broadcast demands for better matchups, which gives, one plays in the Coastal, one plays in the Atlantic. But that's very interesting because you look, it's like, oh, ACC matchup doesn't count in the ACC standings. This is technically a non-conference game, which is weird. But what you're going to see here, I think you're just going to see points, points, points. Wake Forest scored 70 points on Army. They put up 43 or 45 on Duke last week, which of course it's Duke. They're not good, obviously. But they're averaging 43.4 points a game. North Carolina can score the ball pretty well too, 36.5. The question is, are either of these defenses going to be able to get stops? I mean, Wake Forest is allowing 421.5 yards per game. If you look over at North Carolina, 396.6. So that's the question for me is like Tom nailed it with all these skill guys. Which one of these defensive guys is going to make a play? Are they going to be able to stop? We were just talking about punters. I don't know if we're going to be seeing a lot of punts on Saturday. So I'm going to take Wake Forest.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I do think it's just going to be an absolute shootout here. Also, I don't know much about the Wake Forest defense, but I'm going to give Josh Downs a little bit more credit than maybe Tom is giving them. I know you like to have a secondary receiver that can be there if a team goes for a full-on shutdown against someone like him, who's by far their lead receiver. But this guy he's averaging like a touchdown per game. This is the first in 5 games that he didn't score a touchdown. It was against you guys at Notre Dame. But I'm going to go ahead and say something that's probably not too controversial. Notre Dame's defense is much better than Wake Forest. So I don't think they'll be able to shut him down as easily as Notre Dame was able to. This is going to be a QB shootout here. Hartman and Hal, obviously UNC's had their struggles, but Hal's still very good QB, and that dual threat option that he brings them is going to make this very, very close. Listen, all those points that Army scored on here makes me hate Wake Forest a little bit because Army should not be scoring that many points on you, especially with how slow they gameplay. With that running game and just running down the clock so much. So I'm going with the upset here. I'm calling North Carolina, and I hate it because that'll make the committee seem like they were right. But I don't know. It just feels like an upset to me. Moving on to the chaser here, we have Air Force taking on Army. Obviously, the big storyline here is that a few years ago, Air Force, their bird was injured heavily by Army during a prank gone wrong. Air Force has not forgotten about it. Aurora, the eagle, hurt by some pranksters from Army. Obviously,
this was this year?
No, this was prior to COVID, so I think 2019 or 18.
Okay.
Bird has fully recovered, but yeah.
Aurora revenge game.
Yeah. Ever since Turntle, I don't know if you guys remember that one at FSU.
Yes.
Yeah, ever since that, I love the animal plot line. So I figured
that was R.I.P. Turntle. That sucks, dude. Ricky Aguayo, what a piece of shit.
Yeah.
R.I.P. He couldn't fucking kick either.
R.I.P. Turntle, indeed. Fortunately, Aurora is doing fine nowadays. But talking about the football game, Andy, we'll start with you. Who wins the game on the field?
So this is interesting. So Air Force technically will be the home game or home team for this game, but it's actually going to be played at Globe Life Field, the home of the Texas Rangers in Arlington, Texas. Nice little big game neutral site feel. For these two teams, if you're telling me that they fucked with the bird, I don't need to know anything else. I'll take the Falcons.
All right, Tom.
Army has lost 3 straight games to Ball State, Wisconsin by 6, and Wake Forest by 2 touchdowns. They had a bye last week. They're rejuvenated. I like Christian Anderson. He's their leading rusher. Jacoby Buchanan's been solid. Andre Carter's been a great linebacker for them, 8.5 sacks in 7 games. Now, we look at Air Force. They're coming off a 20-14 loss against number 22 San Diego State. Brad Roberts and Hazik Daniels are two players you have to watch for the Falcons. Vince Sanford is a good linebacker. Defensively, they don't give up many points, but I'm looking at this based off of common opponents. In an upset, give me Army to win this football game.
I don't like it. Aurora doesn't like it. Um, I'm I'm going Air Force here. Listen, this is going to be a really all these military games are usually pretty close talent wise and game wise. I think as far as I could find, this is the first neutral site game between these two teams in at least like 30 or so years. So I don't know. The military people usually show out for the military versus military games, so I do think that plays a factor. Neither team will have it, so a little bit of a loss there for Air Force because they do lose that home field, home fan advantage.
How about? Did you see the total for this game? 37.
I live an hour away from West Point.
I actually think that they'll top that over. I might have to take that. That's
over 37.
Yeah, it would be a very boring game if that does go under. But yeah, Tom, you pointed out probably the thing that is the most problematic for me is that Army is on a 3-game losing streak. They're probably not in the best mindset here. Although who knows? I just said that about another team earlier, and
hey, they put up 56 on Wake Forest. Just remember that.
That is true, but I don't know. Air Force has the good win against Boise State. That was on our Shots and Chasers a few weeks ago. They held their own against San Diego State a little bit, and they're only letting up about 17 points per game on defense. So I think they're pretty well rounded. Hopefully those 3 losses make Army a little bit sad. They should be sad for what they did to Aurora a few years ago. Aurora revenge game. I'm taking the Falcons here. Then moving into 3:30, we have Texas A&M taking on Auburn, rank versus rank matchup in the SEC. The committee has put. Actually, I might still have the AP. I got really mad at the committee rankings, and I think I left the AP rankings in here just out of protest. Texas A&M at 13 versus Auburn at number 12. This game on CBS. Those rankings might be incorrect, like I just said. Andy, we'll start with you. Who's your winner for this game?
This one's really interesting. So Auburn all-time has not lost at Kyle Field. I believe they're 3-0 or 4-0. As much as I love to talk shit about Bo Nix and how he sucks, he's actually looked really good the past 3 weeks. I kind of like Auburn in this game, guys.
All right.
I mean, he's not. It's like I hate relying on Bo Nix, but I mean, he's passed over 200 passing yards in every conference game. He's making big plays. I mean, we saw him last week against Ole Miss. I know Ole Miss's offense was banged up. Matt Corral not feeling 100%, but I mean, Auburn's won 4 of their last 5. That one loss coming to Georgia. Tank Bigsby, love that name. He's been doing great. I mean, Zach Calzada had that awesome game against Alabama. Since then, not been able to, really attack through the air against teams like Missouri and South Carolina. Isaiah Spiller, though, has gone over 100 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. So I think it's going to be a shootout, but I'm going to take Auburn.
All right, Tom.
I disagree with Andy.
Cool.
Auburn
Shocker.
is coming off wins. They're coming off wins against Arkansas and Ole Miss. Their 2 losses this year were to Georgia and Penn State. While I am scared about the Tigers' defense, they have 3 players with at least 4 sacks. Let's remember, it was less than a month ago that Texas A&M beat Alabama. They beat South Carolina 2 weeks ago by 30. Zach Calzada has looked pretty decent at quarterback. He's nothing special, but when you look at the Aggies, what can they do well? Pound the rock. Isaiah Spiller and Devin Achane each have over 600 rushing yards on the season, each have 5 touchdowns. Aeneas Smith is a great receiver. Jalen Weidemeyer as well. And their defense is good, guys. Leon O'Neal Jr. and then DeMarvin Leal with 5.5 sacks. Texas A&M, yes, they've never won at Kyle Field against Auburn, but that ends this weekend. Texas A&M wins.
So for me, this game, I've just given up hope on trying to figure out whether Bo Nix is good or not. Just looking at the side by side for these teams, because I'll say I don't trust Calzada either. Andy loves to call out my ratio, loving touchdown to interception ratio. Calzada is not great at that. 12 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. So I don't trust either of these guys really. Despite the fact that Bo Nix has been playing a little bit better. So the stats side by side here, these teams the difference is so marginal in almost every category, it's unbelievable. Points per game is within a few points, points allowed within a few points, both under 20. Yards per game, Auburn has about 450 to Texas A&M's 400. Then you get into the breakdowns. Yards passing, 254 to 208, rushing 197 to 188. And, the defensive yards allowed is pretty similar as well. So I really don't know who I like in this game. Like, it's mainly because of Bo Nix. I think Auburn is probably the better team, but I don't know if I should trust Bo Nix. So what I've done here is I just pulled up a little coin flip app, and I'm just going to flip a coin because at this point, like I said, Bo Nix, heads for Auburn, tails for up. It came up tails, so I guess I'm on A&M despite the fact that I like Auburn. I just don't like Bo Nix. So I'm going Texas A&M thanks to Google's coin flip app. Moving into the chaser for 3:30, we have Purdue. The spoiler makers already have a very nice ranked win, taking on Michigan State, ranked number 3 by the committee, who just took down big boys Michigan. Tom, we'll start with you on this one. Who's winning it?
State. Spartans average 34.5 points per game. Thorne should have a better performance this week. Remember, he's only a sophomore, guys. We keep saying these quarterbacks aren't good. It's because they're young. They're inexperienced. They're bound to make mistakes. Kenneth Walker III is on the verge of getting a nice Heisman Trophy. Almost 1,200 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns. And this defense, 26 sacks in 8 games. The Boilermakers, they've lost to Notre Dame, Minnesota, Wisconsin. They upset Iowa 3 weeks ago, but we've seen the trend Iowa's been on lately. Aiden O'Connell has really struggled out there. Purdue does not have much of a running game to bail them out. I like David Bell. I like Payne Durham, but it's not going to be enough. Those guys are going to stat pad when they're coming from behind in this game. Michigan State wins by a couple possessions.
Yeah, I thought probably the most interesting thing to me about Purdue was the triple quarterback situation they used against Iowa. That doesn't work well in most scenarios, but they pulled it off very nicely. And I thought, okay, this is something that they can continue to do and confuse these teams, because it's not like a Florida situation where Anthony Richardson and Emory Jones both are good on their feet and throw the ball as well. These guys were doing 3 completely different things. They had a dude who was solely in there to run, but then obviously you can pull off the tricky throw when they're not expecting it. They pulled it off very well against Iowa, but they haven't been using it now. I don't know why. They played 2 quarterbacks against Wisconsin, which they lost, and then just 1 against Nebraska. So I don't know what has changed. I do love that they played spoiler against Iowa, but I don't think they're going to do it again against Michigan State here. Like you said, Tom, Kenneth Walker, just an absolute animal. He's probably going to run all over this Boilermaker team. Although I will say, a player on Purdue's defense that I really, really like, and I'm going to call this now because watching this kid, he's really come up. George Karlaftis, defensive end. I think this is maybe a ridiculous call, but I think he's going to be I don't want to say top 10, like top 12 pick in the NFL draft. He's not on many people's radars yet. If you haven't watched this kid, go watch him. He reminds me in build of this Marcus Moeller dude that we're talking about out of Illinois. He's got that big build, but he's lean and he's fast. He's going to be coming off the edge. Do I think he can stop Kenneth Walker, though? Probably not. Probably won't score 5 touchdowns on Purdue, but yeah, I think Kenneth Walker is going to be unstoppable here. Andy?
Yeah, this is really interesting, man. This feels like a letdown spot for Michigan State. This feels like they're riding high off the big win over Michigan, and it feels like, okay, we're going to Purdue. Nobody gives a shit about Purdue, and they're going to overlook them because they have, 2 big games with Penn State and Ohio State still looming. So that is where the Spartans need to look out. I think they'll be okay because they do a lot of things well that Purdue does not. Really, the only people I want you to watch in this game are the 2 that are going to be getting the ball most for each side. It's Kenneth Walker, like Tom mentioned, the Heisman favorite, 1,194 yards, 14 touchdowns on the year. I mean, we saw him his first game, a real big game this year, 264, 4 touchdowns against Northwestern. I mean, he's just good for a big play, it seems, every game. Obviously, last week with 197 and 5 scores against Michigan. So Purdue's going to have their hands full with Walker. Are they able to stop him? I don't know. On the Purdue side of the ball, why I think they actually have a chance in this game. I don't know if they're going to win, but I think they could keep it close. His name is David Bell, folks. He has 53 receptions for 786 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's averaging 14.8 yards per catch versus the AP top 25, 16.9 yards per catch, 17 yards per catch, 304 yards on 18 receptions with 1 touchdown. Michigan State still has the worst pass defense in the Big Ten. Purdue has an opportunity here. It starts with David Bell attacking them through the air. I am going to take the Spartans. I think they win this game, but they need to be weary. Purdue is not a bad football team. Don't overlook the Boilermakers on Saturday, but I'm going to take the Spartans. Just it's really hard not to.
All right, and another game not to overlook at 7. Number 2, Alabama. Still can't believe they're number 2. This is just ridiculous. Tongue-tied me. I looked at it and I saw it and I was like, that can't be right. Number 2, Alabama taking on LSU. LSU having their struggles this year, but this game always is a rivalry game. These 2 teams absolutely hate each other. Maybe the saving grace for Alabama here is that it's in Bryant-Denny, so they don't get to listen to or don't have to listen to, I should say, the drunk LSU fans who would be berating them. Tom, we'll start with you. Does Alabama win, or does LSU pull off the upset?
Well. Bryce Young has completed 70% of his passes. He is a Heisman hopeful, 26 touchdowns. Brian Robinson, 11 touchdowns on the ground. You have Jamison Williams. You have John Mechie. Will Anderson has proven to be an excellent future draft prospect, 8.5 sacks. But I like the way Max Johnson has played as well. Through a year of adversity, he's come on the last few weeks. Davis Price, over 600 rushing yards on the ground. Start to remind you of some former LSU running backs a little bit, the way he makes his first cut. Keyshawn Boutte, 9 TDs. And my guy, B.J. Ojolari, is an outstanding young defensive end for this team. 6 sacks for the Tigers. I won't be able to say that much longer. But Alabama's favored by 28.5. They're at home. LSU, I think the discussion here more is if they cover, and that's really sad. We're talking about do they lose by 4 touchdowns or not? So give me Alabama, guys.
Yeah, there's not much to say about this one. I love this rivalry. I've been to one of these games in Baton Rouge. It's a ton of fun. These 2 teams absolutely hate each other. But this Alabama team is just too good, and this LSU team is just too disjointed this year to give them a fight, I think. I do like how Max Johnson has progressed. Their backup, I can't recall his name right this second, but as of yesterday is now transferring out. So that'll tell you, at the beginning of the season, he thought that was going to be an absolute fight for that starting position. Max Johnson shut the door on that. He's looked very good for the Tigers. But listen, Bryce Young has been phenomenal for Alabama. there's just too many weapons here. But what I will say, I'm taking Alabama, but I'm probably gonna bet LSU here just for the upset factor because they're getting plus 2,000 money line, uh,
Ha!
20 to 1 odds. You might as well take that for you know, on the off chance that Coach O tries to pull something out of his ass, knowing that this is his last season, and oh man, can you imagine what would go through his head if he got this last upset for them? Uh, be an absolute football guy move. So Alabama here, but I'm loving the money line action on LSU. Andy?
That's hilarious. So LSU has an uphill battle. I mean, obviously, defensively over the last 3 games, they've allowed close to 800 yards. That's not good. Alabama is definitely going to keep that going. They're one of the best offenses in the country. Bryce Young, 2,400 yards, 26 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Max Johnson, who you mentioned for the Tigers, 20 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, 2,000 yards of his own. They have had a little bit to rest up. Ty Davis Price is kind of coming into his own really in the backfield, but I just don't think there are enough pieces for this LSU team. Coach O says they're healed up. They still have a lot of injuries. That secondary is going to have their hands full. Brian Robinson is probably going to run all over them as well. I think, we know that Nick Saban's like a crazy person. If you guys remember when LSU beat Alabama a couple of years ago, Coach O in the locker room, there's that video of him saying, "Roll Tide, fuck you." It is going to be a big fuck you for Nick Saban to Coach O and send his ass packing out the door. I think Alabama wins this game. I think they win big. Brian, I will take LSU plus 2,000, though. I love that.
All right. Just it feels like a good opportunity for some free money there, despite the fact that Alabama will probably win.
I'll be rooting for LSU, but I think Alabama's going to win.
Exactly. And then lastly, to wrap it up here, in the late night slot, we have, as our chaser, Boise State taking on Fresno State. Fresno State, the first, I want to get this right, the first, we dogged on the committee, but this is the first G5 team to have 2 losses and still be ranked by the committee. So, higher up the rankings, they've absolutely shit on G5 teams, but I guess a minuscule amount of credit here for ranking Fresno State, who's a pretty good G5 team, and committee decided to keep them in the rankings. So, Andy, we'll start with you. Who's winning Boise State versus Fresno State?
So this is... I didn't realize Boise State was 4-4. Jake Hader, I've been talking about him before. He kind of slowed down a little bit after having those big weeks earlier, but he's still at 2,888 yards, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And then you have Cropper. I don't know if you guys have watched any of their games, but he is his favorite target. 61 receptions for 664, 10 touchdowns. He always seems to be there when they need a play. It's yeah, give me Fresno State. I'm on the Bulldogs here, guys. It's just, if you look at the numbers, Fresno State, they're averaging 35 points a game. They're only allowing 20, 480 yards of total offense, 346 yards allowed. 123 of those are on the ground. They're good against the run. If this was on the blue turf, maybe. But no, it's in Fresno. Give me Fresno State.
All right, Tom.
Well, Boise State is a real Jekyll and Hyde type of team. They lost to UCF. They lose to Oklahoma State by 1 point. They beat BYU back when they were ranked number 10. And then they lose to Air Force. So they have good players on that team, like Andrew Van Buren's a decent running back. Scott Matlock and Isaiah Bagna each have 6 sacks, but Fresno State, guys, they're coming off a 10-point win against San Diego State. Jake Haener has been electric this year. Ronnie Rivers and Jordan Mims are 2 solid options in the backfield for them. And Andy just mentioned their wide receiver, Jalen Cooper, 10 touchdowns on the season. They can't stop that. Fresno State's winning this football game.
Fresno State.
This is really interesting scheduling-wise. You just called out the Boise State schedule. It's just very weird results there. And then on the Fresno State side, they've got 2 losses, one of which is really good to Oregon, who the committee thinks is the fourth best team in the nation. So you got to say that's a quality loss there. But then they've lost to also Hawaii, who's
On
not
island. It was on island.
okay. An on island game, as Andy will point out. They gave him the old aloha.
Oh,
Sent him off the island with the loss. But then
on
they
Fresno State that game. Fuck Hawaii. God damn it.
but then they also did have that win against San Diego State, who's pretty good. They beat UCLA at UCLA, who, their record doesn't show it, but they're a pretty talented team between Dorian Robinson and Zach Charbonnet. So, I think this could be a close game, but I like Fresno State here just because I think Jake Hayner is probably the biggest weapon out of the totality of the game. I think he'll probably out-game manage, Bachmeier and Boise State, who's been kind of on and off here. So I, as well, am taking the Fresno State Bulldogs. And that will wrap up the show for the week. If you haven't, and you made it this far, be sure to like and subscribe down below. We would appreciate it. Links down below in the description for everything else. Links for Andy's show down in the description. Links for Tom's show down in the description as well. Enjoy the games this week, and we'll see everybody next week for Week 11.